Made in China. This is a story of ambition, trade, and unintended consequences. This story navigates the path to China's rise and how America built its greatest rival. In the shadow of the Cold War, President Nixon made a historic move by opening the door to China. US begins exporting capital, ideas, and trust. President Carter took it further, formally recognizing Beijing in 1979. President Reagan turned the goodwill into a trade. The West saw opportunity, and China saw a once-in-a-century opening. This is a story of ambition, trade, and unintended consequences. This is China today. Sleek cities, cutting-edge technology, a manufacturing leader, a rising superpower. But rewind just a few decades, and you'll find the blueprint came not from Beijing, but from Washington. What if we told you America didn't just trade with China, it built China's rise? In 1972, President Richard Nixon made history, opening diplomatic relations with Communist China. Nixon said, "We have an obligation to make deal with China." As a result, trade flowed, trust began. But this wasn't yet a revolution. It was just planting seeds. By the 1980s, US businesses eyed the China's cheap labor. China was still poor at this time, and the transformation was yet to come. In 1990s, the deal of the century was made. President Bill Clinton signed an agreement to enter China into World Trade Organization. President Clinton believed trade would reform China, and he gave China a key to global markets, the PNTR status. In return was the promise, more freedom, more democracy. What followed was not freedom. It was a flood. American corporations chased profits in Guangzhou and Shenzhen. The result, between 2001 to 2009, the US factories shuttered. 3.7 million US manufacturing jobs lost. Then comes the time for beginning of great shift, the US manufacturing exodus. Under President George W. Bush, the gates for China further swung wide open, and the corporations flocked to China. Apple, Nike, Walmart, all chasing scale and cost efficiency. Between 2001 and 2008, American corporations poured billions into China. Production moved, profits soared. And China? Well, it started to rise and never slept again. But at home, towns collapsed. The Rust Belt wasn't just rusting, it was bleeding out. The US lost millions of manufacturing jobs. The trade deficit started to emerge, from 80 billion in 2001 to 260 billion in 2008. Meanwhile, China was transforming. Smartphones, cars, steel, even military technology. By 2008, China became the factory of the world. Between 2009 to 2017, President Obama inherited a world changed by trade. And by 2014, China became America's #1 trade partner. Tech giants like Huawei and Tencent exploded, supported by US capital and markets. But by this time, the warnings began to echo. United States' dependency on China has deepened further. America had outsourced not just jobs, but its resilience. Year 2017. President Trump, the pushback, tariffs, and the battle for economic control. President Trump called it what it was, an unfair relationship. In 2018, President Trump imposes tariffs on $250 billion in Chinese imports to bring the factories back home, targeting China's steel, tech, and telecoms. But reversing decades of offshoring wasn't simple. And then came the world's worst nightmare, COVID-19 pandemic, and it hit like a hammer. This is when America needed supply chains the most. Well, they were halfway across the Pacific. In 2020, 72% of US personal protective equipments came from the China. Year 2021. Under President Joe Biden, tariffs remained and new plans emerged. $52 billion were invested for American chip factories and semiconductors, new alliances, new supply chains. But rebuilding resilience takes time. So, what did it cost? In helping build China's economy, the United States gave away more than just manufacturing. It gave up leverage, supply chain control, and a piece of its global leadership. American communities hollowed out, and now we live with the consequences. For decades, America believed that helping China would create an ally. Instead, it built its greatest rival. Now, the world watches as two giants reshape the 21st century, one built by ambition, the other by unintended consequences. The battle for global power is only the beginning. Did you like this documentary? If so, please subscribe to get notifications for many more to come.